Hey folks, welcome back aboard Charis. In a previous discussion, I mentioned having a saltwater washdown system throughout the boat. And today I want to do a short episode that some of you might call Captain Obvious. But what I want to discuss is the use of the saltwater washdown on the anchor tackle. Now, some of you will remember that I mentioned originally Charis came with an anchor washdown. It wasn't a very good pump. It was a rubber impeller, very low pressure saltwater pump, and eventually I replaced that with a SureFlow blaster, which is a pretty capable, good solid 35 psi, fairly high flow rate pump. So probably one of the most important things that I would mention if you're going to do a pressure saltwater system in your boat is that on your panel, on the breaker for that pump, there should be an indicator light. You'll notice that there's an indicator light for the gas valve. In this case, I also have one for the inverter, which I prefer not to leave on. The reason for the indicator light is that a pressurized saltwater pump, particularly a high flow, high pressure pump, will sink your boat really fast if a line bursts. So basically I want something telling me that that pump is on, and normally that pump is not on. So it's one of those items that I switch on when I want to use the pump and then switch off. So recall that I discussed previously having a saltwater tap in the galley for dishwashing and such, where you use the salt water for most of your washing needs and then do a final freshwater rinse. So back aft here at the aft end of the cockpit, there are two outdoor taps, and you might think at first glance that would be hot and cold fresh water, but in fact what that is fresh water and pressure salt water. There's a very good reason for that. In earlier days, the way of taking a offshore saltwater cockpit bath was the ubiquitous canvas bucket. Until one day when I tossed the bucket over the side with the lanyard around my wrist and realized that that bucket is a pretty darn good sea anchor. And it was at that moment of thinking this would be a really stupid way to be found dead that I decided that kind of made sense if you're going to take saltwater baths in the cockpit to come up with something a little better than the bucket on a lanyard. Hence the outdoor saltwater tap. This one's quite handy for a lot of things. I've been working on a propane instant hot water heater option here that works reasonably well. I'll cover that in a later episode. But the basic idea is you can use salt water through the propane water heater, take as long a hot shower as you want with salt water, and then at the end very quickly switch the quick connect over to the fresh water and rinse both yourself and the water heater out. The chain locker on Charis is at the foot of my bunk. And what that means is that whatever comes up on the anchor chain is about 7 feet away from my nose when I sleep at night. So you might be able to guess that you want some way to keep smelly bottom mud and whatever comes up with your anchor chain out of the cabin to the best that you can. There is a Dorade vent on deck for that locker, but best to get that chain in the locker clean. So in way of background here, I'd point out that Charis does not have an anchor windlass. So part of the reason for this washdown holder system is that I absolutely need both hands free when I'm hauling back. And that was the original idea. So up here on the foredeck, there's just a short piece of hose. With a shutoff that needs a new gasket. It's dripping, as you can see. And that short hose runs up to the simplest imaginable connection. And what you've got here is a rail clamp with a short piece of hose zip tied onto it. So that what you're doing there is you're essentially sticking your garden hose, spray nozzle end, into that, and then adjusting your rail clamp until you're pointed just right. What you want here is for your water spray to hit your anchor chain just as it makes the turn over the bow roller. If you do that, about 90% of the mud is going to come out, and the other 10% you can do just by pausing, running it back and forth a couple of times. But this setup is super simple. It's virtually essential if you need both hands to haul back because you don't have a windlass, as in the case here. But I see a lot of people, even with a windlass, holding the hose by hand, and that just seems to me to be, I don't know, a little cumbersome. This is really a $20 solution to a $100 problem. Now, on the gold platers that I've worked on, of course, if money's no object, then what we would do is we would build spray nozzles right into the bow roller so that that saltwater spray is shooting right at the anchor chain, which is great if your boat's set up that way. If it's not, this inexpensive rail clamp and a small piece of garden hose zip tied onto it is a sort of Rube Goldberg solution that you may find useful. There again, if you already have a saltwater washdown. I don't know that I'd put a saltwater washdown system in the boat if it didn't already have one, although now that I've found it useful for saving fresh water, I suppose I might. So this system is just one of those little simple things that I think a lot of people might benefit from just the idea of, but as I say, sort of a Captain Obvious episode here. Okay, so here we are, a little closer up view. This rail clamp is a pretty standard online item. This one's pretty crusty, as you can see. The modification was just tie wrapping a piece of hose around it. I actually stuck a little piece of pipe that happened to be the right size in the hose to tighten up a little bit. And obviously for this installation you want to use the old-fashioned cylindrical style. I think they used to call this a suicide nozzle. But anyway, this is the hose end that works well with this system because you can slide it down inside. I also find that these last longer. They don't get all crudted up inside. So I've no doubt whatsoever that many of the young geniuses out there in the crowd with 3D printers on board can beat the $17 price tag of these plastic rail clamps as I show here. But for those of us of the old school, this is the easiest way to actually acquire one of these clamps and make yourself a hose holder. So a few closing thoughts as we watch this mesmerizing footage of Cuttyhunk bottom mud being washed off my anchor chain. There are times actually after you've been offshore for a while and experienced some sensory deprivation where the earthy smell of bottom mud is actually kind of good. But none of those times are when you're trying to sleep at night. So the main idea here is keep that mud out of your chain locker. Even if it doesn't smell really horrible to you, it's going to end up someplace you don't want it. The bilge pump, clogging up drains from the chain locker. You really want to try and keep that stuff overboard if you can help it. So I'm working on a separate video that's taking me a little bit longer with my very rudimentary video skills here. And that's going to deal more directly with the physics of hauling the anchor back, the forces involved, and how to do it relatively safely without destroying your lower back. And then a little bit philosophically about why I don't have an anchor windlass up here yet. Spoiler alert, I have nothing against anchor windlasses. You just have to be willing, like a water maker or any other high maintenance piece of gear, to do the maintenance work and keep it working. You don't want to get used to having an anchor windlass and then one day realize that it just doesn't work when you really need it. And manual windlasses, well, they're fine, but of limited use for a single-hander, because we need to relatively quickly get the anchor from the bottom to the bow roller with no one else at the helm, particularly in crowded anchorages. So that's the story of the third hand, the anchor washdown hose holder. Again, very simple, but hopefully useful to some folks who are still trying to do this with one hand for the ship and one hand for the washdown hose. Thanks for stopping by.